I and my sister cut ties with our mother 6 years ago after she married Gerald, a financial advisor who inserted himself between us after our dad died. My father died at 53 from a hereditary heart condition. My grandfather started our family restaurant in 1968. It was a key business in town for decades. When my dad died, my sister and I planned to run it together. Gerald married Mom a year after Dad died, when she was vulnerable. He suggested Mom get professional help with finances despite Dad leaving everything in order. Within months, he was questioning every business decision at the restaurant, despite having no restaurant experience. The estrangement began when Gerald convinced Mom to sell the restaurant, saying it was financially draining, despite showing her the books, proving steady income. Gerald told me I was too emotionally attached to see clearly and was undermining the family's financial security. Mom said nothing. I spent weeks gathering financial evidence and community impact statements to prove the restaurant should stay in the family. When I presented my case, Gerald barely looked at it before saying I was acting irrationally. The restaurant was sold the next month to a developer who turned it into a coffee chain. About 8 months later, I discovered Gerald had convinced Mom to liquidate a trust fund Dad had established for me and my sister's future. Dad had been meticulous about our financial security, knowing his condition could take him early. Gerald told Mom that family unity requires shared resources and that separate accounts were creating division in their marriage. When confronted, Mom gave us an ultimatum. She said she couldn't handle being torn between her husband and children and needed us to be one family. She said, accept Gerald's financial decisions or be cut off. My sister and I chose the latter. I'm sitting in my kitchen working on the wedding invitation, debating whether to include Mom after 6 years of silence. The mock-up has her name crossed out, added back, and crossed out again. My fiancée Emma walks in and sits beside me. She reminds me to follow the steps we practiced for stress. I show her the invitation list with Mom's crossed-out name. I explain I received 3 calls from her this week after she learned about our engagement. Emma suggests the wedding could be a chance for reconciliation, but acknowledges it's my decision since she knows the history. She offers perspective without pushing. My phone buzzes with a text from Mom. I raised you better than to exclude family. Your father would be ashamed of how you've treated me. Gerald agrees we should all move forward. I read it and feel upset. Gerald has tried to diminish Dad's memory since day one. He once suggested my heart condition was psychosomatic instead of the hereditary condition that killed my father. Emma reads the message and says, she doesn't get to use your dad like that after everything Gerald did. Another text arrives. I've already mentioned the wedding to your cousins. They're expecting invitations. Don't embarrass me by leaving us out. I put down the phone. I tell Emma I need to decide about the invitation, but feel trapped by guilt even though my boundaries are reasonable. The situation has me second-guessing myself constantly. Later that evening, my sister calls, upset because Mom contacted her too. Mom has been telling people I'm punishing her for moving on after their father died, and that Gerald was heartbroken about being excluded from family milestones. My sister is furious. She remembers how Gerald isolated Mom from us and dismantled our family legacy. I still wonder if I'm being unnecessarily cruel. Mom is still my mom, but I remember how she stood by while Gerald sold our grandfather's restaurant, watched as he liquidated the trust fund Dad set up for our futures, and ultimately chose him over her children when we raised valid concerns. A quick note, many commenters pointed out when I shared this situation with friends that toxic parents often ramp up manipulation around major life events like weddings, trying to force their way back in during emotionally charged times. I'm starting to see that pattern now. My cousin called yesterday saying Mom has been telling the family I have emotional issues because of my heart condition affecting my thinking. Gerald has spun that narrative for years. She's making it sound like I'm unstable and irrational rather than someone who set boundaries after financial exploitation. Every time I consider sending that invitation, I get stressed. My cardiologist warned me to keep my stress levels down. Emma suggested we could invite Mom, but not Gerald, but Mom made it clear years ago it's both of them or neither. The ultimatum stands. I keep going back and forth on what to do about the invitation. Should I stand firm on the boundaries I've maintained for 6 years, or reach out and risk another rejection? Is there something I'm missing that would make this situation easier? Now for the first update. Update. I'm back after my last post got a lot of attention. I've read as many responses as I could and appreciate all the support and advice. After days of going back and forth on the wedding invitation, I made a decision. I told my mom she was welcome at my wedding, but Gerald was not. I explained that after what happened with the restaurant and the trust fund, I couldn't have Gerald there. Her response was what many predicted. She called me selfish and immature. She said it was inappropriate and disrespectful to invite her without her husband. She repeated her ultimatum from 6 years ago. Both of them or neither of them. I expected this, but it still hurt to hear it so directly. What I didn't expect was Gerald taking matters into his own hands. Within 48 hours of my message, he contacted family members. My cousin said Gerald was telling people I excluded my mother because of unresolved mental health issues after my dad's death. Using mental health as a weapon is low. Then, my maternal aunt called about the family rift. She said Gerald told everyone my heart condition was affecting my thinking and that I was paranoid about family finances. He used the same tactic years ago to undermine me about the restaurant. I was at my grandmother's house helping with old family photographs when my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered. It was Gerald. He said he wanted to resolve the misunderstanding about the wedding. I stayed on the call to see what he said next. He suggested my medication was affecting my judgment and offered to manage the wedding finances, saying, "Your mother and I worry about the strain on your resources." That was ironic coming from the man who liquidated my trust fund. He said he spoke with our venue about accessibility for my heart condition. We hadn't told him which venue we chose. I asked how he knew about our venue. He said, "Your mother and I care about you, son. We keep tabs on important things." I never called him dad, so calling me son felt manipulative. He said my dad's old business connections would be disappointed to hear about excluding my mother. That was a clear threat. He said, "Your mother has been patient with your rebellion, but this wedding ends now. Family stands together, and you're harming her health with this stress." My grandmother took the phone and told Gerald he wasn't welcome to contact me again. She hung up despite his protests. After the call, my grandmother said Gerald had tried for years to manage her finances and family heirlooms, including the restaurant recipes. She refused, but he kept pushing, especially after my sister and I cut ties with Mom. My grandmother didn't tell me before because she didn't want to add to my burden. She handled it herself, but now she thought I needed to know. Gerald's control attempts included my grandmother's finances and our family's restaurant recipes, passed down from my grandfather. That evening, I got an email from Gerald, copied to family members. He said he was concerned about my declining judgment and suggested a family intervention to address my unresolved issues. His intent was to make me look unstable. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. I never thought I'd need legal protection from family, but I now need professional intervention. My grandmother said Gerald asked her to sign paperwork she didn't understand. She refused. I'm still processing everything, but I've set up a meeting with my lawyer about a cease and desist letter or a restraining order. Emma has been my support, reminding me this isn't normal family drama and that protecting myself is necessary. I want to thank everyone who encouraged me to stand firm on my boundaries and warned me that toxic people escalate when confronted. I didn't expect Gerald to go this far, but his behavior has been consistent, just escalating. The wedding is still a few months away, so I have time to get legal protections in place. I'm also working with our venue to implement password protection for any changes and letting all vendors know that only Emma and I are authorized to make decisions. This journey with my mother and Gerald is far from over, but I feel better equipped to handle whatever comes next. Now for the second update. Update 2. It's been about 2 weeks since my last post. Thanks for all the awards and kind messages. I wasn't planning on writing another update yet, but things have escalated and I need to get this off my chest. After forwarding Gerald's email to my lawyer, I thought things would calm down. I was wrong. The last couple weeks have been a nightmare. My lawyer advised me to document everything, so I've been keeping detailed records of all interactions. First off, I discovered that Gerald has been contacting our wedding vendors using my mom's email address. Our florist called to confirm the changes that my mother requested. When I asked what changes, she said someone emailed to downsize our flower order because of budget concerns. I never approved this. I checked with other vendors and found out Gerald had contacted at least 3 others. sometimes asking for information and other times trying to make changes to our arrangements. We set up passwords with all vendors and updated contact information to only include me and Emma. My sister called last weekend. Mom told her that being excluded from my wedding was killing her, and she couldn't understand why her children abandoned her when she found happiness again. My sister was affected by Mom's manipulation more than I was. I reminded her that we didn't abandon Mom. She chose Gerald over us when we raised concerns about our family's financial security. My heart condition flared up last week. My doctor adjusted my medication after I had palpitations during a meeting with our caterer. The caterer mentioned accommodating Mr. Gerald's dietary requests. He had reached out to them and acted like he was invited. I have documentation of all this for the restraining order we're considering. Then I got a call from my dad's oldest friend, who has mentored me since Dad passed. He was concerned because Gerald told him I had pre-wedding paranoia and needed an intervention. Dad's friend wasn't buying it, but Gerald reaching out to people close to my father is infuriating. I think he's trying to rewrite my relationship with my dad's memory. During the final venue walkthrough with Emma, I saw my mother sitting in the venue's cafe across the reception hall, reading a magazine and watching us. Emma saw her too and whispered we should continue. This wasn't a coincidence. She knew when we'd be there. The venue coordinator was explaining the table arrangements when my mother approached and said, "I just wanted to see where my only son is getting married, since I haven't been allowed to participate." The coordinator looked uncomfortable. My mother pulled out her phone and showed photos of the family restaurant's opening day, saying, "This was our family legacy before my son decided money was more important than relationships." I said, "The restaurant you and Gerald sold against Dad's wishes? The one that was supposed to stay in the family for generations? That legacy?" She said, "You've never understood the financial burden your father left me with. Gerald saved us from bankruptcy, but you've painted him as a villain." I mentioned the trust fund Dad established for me and my sister that Gerald convinced her to liquidate. She said, "Don't air our private matters in public. This is why Gerald worries about your judgment." Her phone rang, and she stepped away after saying, "I hope you'll reconsider having your father's mother at the wedding instead of me. She's never approved of any of your relationships." After she left, the coordinator apologized and said a man identifying himself as my stepfather had called multiple times requesting information about our wedding arrangements. He claimed he needed to coordinate surprise elements with the venue. The coordinator said she might have mentioned our walkthrough appointment during one of the calls. Thank you to the Redditor who suggested venue security in my last post. We've now hired security for the wedding day. Edit 5:45 p.m. After we got home from the venue, I received a group email from Gerald addressed to every extended family member. The email detailed his growing concerns about my emotional stability before the wedding. He suggested a family meeting to discuss appropriate support and implied my heart condition was affecting my mental clarity. Several relatives have called me asking if I'm okay because of his smear campaign. I called my lawyer and we're discussing legal options for protection from harassment. While I was on the phone with my lawyer, my sister called. She told me Gerald had been inquiring about our grandmother's will. He suggested to some family members that our grandmother might not be competent to manage her affairs. My grandmother is 84 and is the last connection we have to my dad and the family restaurant through her recipes and mementos. She's also financially comfortable, which is probably what Gerald is after. I've sent all the new documentation to my lawyer and we're moving forward with legal action. Emma has been supporting me through all of this, reminding me that this isn't normal family drama and that we're doing the right thing by establishing boundaries. But I'm worried about my grandmother now. Gerald is always one step ahead. I'll post updates as the legal situation progresses. Now for the final update. Final update. The wedding happened, and Gerald finally got what was coming to him. Thanks for all your amazing support these past few months. I honestly didn't expect to be writing a happy ending to this saga, but here we are. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and everything came to a head right before the wedding. Last Monday, I was at work trying to finish things before my time off when I got a call from my grandma's caregiver. She said Gerald and my mom had shown up unannounced at grandma's house and were insisting on helping organize important family documents, despite my grandma repeatedly asking them to leave. She's 84, which made this infuriating. I immediately called my sister and my lawyer, who at this point probably has me on speed dial. My lawyer already had that cease and desist letter prepared after all the wedding vendor interference, so she grabbed it and agreed to meet us at Grandma's place. Sorry to everyone I cut off on the highway that day. When we pulled up, Gerald's BMW was in the driveway. The caregiver met us outside and explained that Gerald had convinced Grandma's elderly neighbor to let them in using the spare key by claiming they were surprising her with wedding preparations. That upset me. My sister and I walked in to find Gerald sitting at Grandma's kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. My mom was in the living room with Grandma, who looked upset but was trying to keep calm. The moment we walked in, Gerald slid some documents into his briefcase and stood up with a practiced smile that made me uncomfortable. I immediately noticed something was off. My grandma's house is always immaculate. Cabinet doors were open, boxes pulled from closets, drawers left ajar. My sister started discreetly taking photos with her phone. She's always been better at documenting things than me. That's when I realized what was missing. "Where's Dad's recipe book?" I asked, looking at the shelf where my grandma always kept it. For context, this wasn't just any recipe book. It contained all the original handwritten Armenian recipes from our family restaurant that Gerald convinced my mom to sell. It was one of the few tangible connections we had left to our dad and our heritage. Gerald tried to keep smiling, but his eyes got shifty. My grandma, who had been quietly distressed, suddenly said she told them repeatedly those weren't theirs to take. She looked close to tears, which I had rarely seen since my dad's funeral. That's when my lawyer walked in and introduced herself. Gerald's expression changed on the spot. My lawyer calmly presented the cease and desist letter, explaining that Gerald and my mom were being formally warned against further harassment, interference with wedding arrangements, or unauthorized access to my grandmother's property. She also mentioned that entering someone's home under false pretenses and removing items without permission could potentially lead to criminal charges. Gerald started blustering about family helping family when my grandma stated she wanted her recipe book back immediately and for them to leave. My mom argued that the recipes were family heritage that belongs to everyone, rich coming from the person who sold the restaurant. But she stopped when I pulled out my phone, showing the photos I'd taken of the recipe book months earlier. I documented everything: the book itself, individual pages, and even a video of my grandma explaining the significance of certain recipes and confirming they belonged to her. Cornered, Gerald went out to his car and came back with the recipe book, along with several other family photos and documents he'd taken. He claimed he was just organizing them and had always intended to return everything. The items were in his car, not on the table. After they left, with Gerald glaring at me the whole time, my grandma revealed something disturbing. Gerald had been pressuring her to add him as a signatory to her accounts for convenience and had suggested selling her home to simplify her life. He'd even brought paperwork for her to sign that would have given him power of attorney. Thank God she didn't sign anything. We spent the rest of the day changing locks, documenting everything, and making sure Grandma was okay. My sister stayed with her until after the wedding. We also discovered Gerald had tried to access Grandma's safe deposit box at her bank, claiming to be helping with wedding preparations. Fortunately, the bank refused him access without Grandma present. The wedding itself went well. We had security guards at every entrance checking IDs against the guest list. Gerald and my mom didn't show up, though we found out later they'd driven by the venue a couple times. My dad's sister gave a toast that had everyone in tears, and my grandma sat in the front row smiling. 3 days after the wedding, while Emma and I were on our honeymoon, my sister called to tell me that Gerald had been reported to the Financial Regulatory Board by one of his clients for unethical practices. Apparently, he'd been doing to other families what he did to ours. His firm put him on immediate leave pending investigation, and according to my sister's friend who works there, it's not looking good for him. I enjoyed a celebratory drink when I heard that news. We got back from our honeymoon last week, and things have finally started to settle. Emma and I are adjusting to married life, and my grandma has been spending more time with us, teaching Emma some of the family recipes. We're even talking about opening a small cafe using some of my dad's recipes. Nothing as big as the original restaurant, but a way to honor his memory and our heritage. Edit. Forgot to mention that about a week after the confrontation at my grandma's house, My mom called me crying. She said Gerald had been lying to her about their finances for years, and she was starting to see him for who he really was. Part of me wanted to be sympathetic, but after everything that happened, I told her I hoped she'd get the help she needed and that maybe someday we could talk, but right now I needed space. She seemed to understand, which was the first reasonable reaction I've seen from her in years. Life, after standing up to Gerald's manipulation, is surprising sometimes. I'm in a much better place now than I ever thought possible, and I have all of you to thank for your advice and support through this whole ordeal.